कर्णेभिः शृणुयाम देवाः भद्रं पश्येमाक्षभिर्यजत्राः स्थिरैरङ्गैः सुष्ठुवशेम देवहितैर्यदायुः ॐ शान्तिः 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 ॐ सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्तिः शान्तिः शान्तिः।
नमस्कार। आदरणीय श्री डोवल जी, श्री गुरुमूर्ति जी, प्रोफेसर दिलीप चक्रवर्ती जी, distinguished guests, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure for me to welcome you to today's function being organized to release the VIF's History of Ancient India volumes. Some of you would recall that the first 5 volumes were released in December 2013 by Shri L.K. Advani. And we are now really delighted that we are in a position to release the remaining volumes. The total is 11 volumes. And we are grateful that Shri Ajit Doval ji, National Security Advisor, and Shri Gurumurthy ji, Chairman of the Board of Trustees of the VIF, are with us today. They are the initiators of this flagship project of the VIF, and the idea was conceived many years ago by Gurumurthy ji and brought to fruition by Doval ji. And this was indeed a gigantic task, humongous task. And I'm sure that Gurumurthy ji and Doval ji would have a feeling of satisfaction today that we have finished this work and releasing this volume. So it is really their initiative that we are today commemorating. Shri Doval, he wrote the foreword to the first volume, and in that he mentions that the VIF undertook the task envisioned by Swami Vivekanand ji. The idea behind bringing these volumes was to remove the distortions in writing Indian history by Western scholars and their camp followers in India who were very active in post-independence period. Selective, one-sided narration of the exploits of the foreign invaders into India deliberately ignored India's achievements and generated an inferiority complex amongst a generation of Indians. So I think these volumes correct some of those misperceptions and those distortions. So that is, I think, the real significance of these volumes. The History of Ancient India series covers India's prehistoric roots, proto-historic foundations, political, social, economic history, and ancient India's contributions to science and technology, medicine, literature, religious and philosophical systems. This should be of great interest to young generation at a time when India is experiencing a renaissance. And I want to express my deepest gratitude to Professor Dilip Chakrabarti, who has worked continuously without break on this project for the past several years and edited all these volumes. So thank you, Chakrabarti ji. I mean, without your dedication, hard work, guidance, inspiration, and perseverance, the project would not have been completed. Who co-edited the first 5 volumes with Professor Chakrabarti, and his significant and made significant contribution to these volumes in the initial traveling. But he knows about it, and we talked to him this morning. Professor Dilip Chakrabarti and Professor Makhanlal were able to mobilize, I think, maybe over 80 or 100 scholars who contributed to these volumes, and this was indeed a remarkable achievement. And we hope that these volumes will serve as reference books for future researchers. Shri Doval ji to kindly release these volumes.
Respected Sri Gurumurti ji, respected Dr. Gupta, and ladies and gentlemen. In about March 2011, the VIF, under the directorship of Sri A.K. Doval, Kirti Chakra, decided to sponsor the publication of a multi-volume series on the history of ancient India. In the same month, I received a formal letter from Sri Doval to get on with the work on the project. Total support was assured, and not for a moment was any condition attached except that it should be an objective and factual history conforming to basic nationalist pride in the story of the land. This spirit and belief in academic freedom, with the philosophy of quote-unquote nation first behind it, give the VIF its distinct character. Add to this the fact that the VIF has collected in its portal some of the brightest minds in the country, and this explains why I consider that it is a rare opportunity and privilege to be associated in some way with this institution. The journey of the series has been interesting in its own way. Our academics, especially the ones in the domain of the humanities and social science, refuse to be drawn into any kind of time-bound writing schedule. This often landed us in trouble. One contributor wrote back at the end of 6 months that another 6 months would be required because she had some important seminars or conferences to attend in China. Although not everybody dragged in China, peremptory letters of this kind were fairly common. A couple of lady luminaries of some university located in Sonipat gave the broad hint that neither the VIF nor its editor was classy enough or left liberal enough for them to get involved. This business of class and left liberalism is certainly an important factor in certain sections of the Indian academia and its related publishing world, which moves around tight personal connections and lobbies. One does not have to be impressed by the names of the university presses. In my subject, Indian archaeology and ancient history, I have seen more or less junk dissertations being regularly published by university presses held generally in great esteem. There is another variety of academics in India, a variety which believes in the continuation of projects and never in their completion. A very large number of national fellowships are awarded to retired Indian academics every year, and very few of them ever get completed, although the awardees often flaunt themselves as quote-unquote national professors. Things being what they are, ladies and gentlemen, I am somewhat relieved that all the proposed 11 volumes of the series have been completed and published. The responsibility of publication has been borne by Sri Vikas Arya of Aryan Books International, and when things were low, two former students of mine were of great help in hunting our contributors, Professor K.T.S. Singh Sarao and Professor R.K. Chakrabarti. At the VIF itself, everybody's welcoming smile had been something to look forward to every winter, and if anybody has to be specially mentioned, Mrs. Anuttama Ganguly's name comes immediately to the fore. In a multi-volume series, there are many contributors, and I'm thankful to each of them for rising to the occasion and bringing the volumes to successful conclusion. Beginning with a volume on prehistoric background. The basic data and related problems of the subcontinental prehistory have been put forward region by region.
I now request Gurumurti ji to make a few remarks.
Shri Doval ji and Dr. Dilip Chakrabarti, who headed this huge project with the patience and the moderation which lends high credibility and visibility to this whole multi-dimensional, all-inclusive understanding of Indian civilization. And Dr. Gupta, who introduced the subject here. When we thought of this, it was quite natural Because in India, we never wrote our history. We only read the history which others wrote for us. This was always known. So the effort of every nationalist thinker in India during the freedom movement was to source the Indian civilization from the nationalist perspective. Naturally, after the freedom, we all thought that that would be the task which the system, the government institutions, and the government-funded scholars would undertake to present the Indian history as the Indians understand and as they saw for a continuum which seems to be denied to all other civilizations, because every civilization has an end or a beginning. This is the only civilization which has no beginning and which has no end. And so it required a very different perspective to understand, which was not within the campus of the masters who ruled us for 300 years. So, as a nationalist think tank, Vivekananda International Foundation thought it was necessary to present an all-inclusive historical perspective about the Indian civilization, not about who conquered, who ruled, how he destroyed. These were all the concerns of the historians all over the world. But we thought that kings do not define the history or the people or the way of life or the future, because they come and go. It is the way the people organize themselves outside the state, their arts, the music, the science, the technology. This has never been the concern of the masters of history. So we thought we should present a wholesome we only expressed our wish. I expressed a desire, but the person who got it done was Mr. Doval. He pursued it with the kind of vigor which we very rarely see and associate with a person of law and order speciality. And we found Dr. Gupta, Dr. Chakrabarti, and he had the stature. Without stature, you can't undertake a project of this size and kind. And from 2011 to 2024, in 12 years, that we could bring out, it's not just investing some money or finding a printer. It's a question of what is the content. In fact, I was amazed at how it comprehends mathematics. It comprehends how calculus originated in India and how it traveled, what medium, who are all the persons who took it, and what is the source for the information that is contained. These are all not ordinary information to be gathered and put in a comprehensive volume as part of it. So this is a masterly work for which I should thank Dr. Chakrabarti and all the people who associated. And this is really an achievement, which of course, for which the Vivekananda International Foundation can take credit for having organized this, but we did nothing more than merely organizing. The work was done by the scholars. The other aspect which I would like to say, 3 points I would like to share, that history is a continuous process. In fact, like in many areas, I have been a trespasser. I had very closely associated with Airavatham Mahadevan, who was one of the greatest epigraphists that India produced, and probably one of the masters who understood the Indus Valley civilization and interpreted it in the context of the Vedic civilization. Till 1978, he was of the view the Indus Valley was Dravidian and Vedic civilization interfered with the Indus Valley civilization. First, people thought it was invasion, then they said it was migration, and in 1978, how a multidisciplinary approach is needed. I was sitting with Airavatham Mahadevan when he compared the Indus Valley seals and the Somapana Yajna chapter in the Rigveda and found that what is described as Somapana Yajna is exactly depicted in the Indus Valley. He told me that I am going mad. Then he submitted a paper in 1983 in Tokyo, where he said there is a confluence of the Vedic civilization and Indus Valley civilization. where the 2,500 Indus Valley seals represent the Somapana Yajna description in the Rig Veda. And he went to the extent of saying the word Bharata, Bharat, originated in the Indus Valley symbols. And of course, he has given to me all his handwritten notes and unpublished manuscripts. And I am extremely happy that I worked with him for nearly 25 years to understand how history is not the work of historians alone. It is a multidisciplinary project. You need the understanding of science, you need the understanding of Vedas, you need the understanding of Sanskrit, and what not. And we are now limiting it to such whether somebody is a leftist or not decides whether history is true or not. How foolish we have been in understanding our history. That is the first thing. Take for instance our own history. Because Saraswati river is mentioned in the Vedas. And Saraswati doesn't exist. Saraswati is imaginary, so the Vedic civilization was imaginary, and it is some pure sounds whose meaning nobody could capture, and so the whole thing is imaginary and something which is not to be attended to, or we need not have to waste our time on it. But now, evidence is emerging that maybe Saraswati existed. So if Saraswati existed, then the very interpretation that the Vedas were fake, that goes. Second, Vedas were mere sounds. It was captured into a language, written into a script much, much later, from the 2nd century BC. But if Nobel laureates, at least a dozen of them, said that for the modern science and the questions that quantum science puts to us, the answer is in the Vedas. Then the Vedic rishis were not poets. They understood a much deeper and much more profound truths, universal truths. But have we ever integrated the opinion of the Nobel laureates about Vedas and that they contained scientific knowledge? If it contains scientific knowledge, then the origin of the Indian civilization must be scientific. Have we ever integrated into our historic studies? Our historic studies still proceeds on the basis the Vedas were fake. So you can understand the difference between the origin of the Indian civilization and where the historical studies started, with kings beating each other and armies killing each other as the basis for writing history, and the territories conquered and lost, and that is the basis of history. And you can understand the paradigm difference between the truth and the history that has been presented to us. And it's a massive job. And partly it has been accomplished. I'm very happy to say that Vivekananda International Foundation and Dr. Chakrabarti did not rewrite the history. We don't have to rewrite the history. We have to write our history. We have to be completely rejecting what has been written as having nothing to do with us and go to the original sources. Understand it as things they are and present it, and falsehood will get rejected. And I'm extremely happy nowhere we have used the word rewriting of Indian history. The last point I would like to mention. We need an Indian, this is an appeal to, because this is a talk which I had with Vikram Sampath, who is emerging as one of the most important researchers into Indian history in the Indian way and with an Indian mind and unconquered by the kind of ideas that are floating around as modern. And he has his own way of perceiving India. I had a very long chat with him for about a couple of months back about developing an Indian theory of how to write history for India, because we are writing history from epigraphy, from archaeology, from linguistics, and whatever little source of information we can get from somebody who saw India, somebody who heard about India. But we have to do a combined, comprehensive, multidisciplinary approach, as I suggested. If the Vedas are scientific, then the Vedic rishis must be scientific people. And if Saraswati River existed, Vedas existed. If they existed, then the civilization has a very different origin. There is nothing called prehistoric in India. The prehistoric, post-historic division, whether it applies to India or not, itself is a big question mark. So all these things need to be addressed. We have taken the first step now, and it is a very important step. And I am extremely happy to have been associated with it. And I feel that the attempt has been to capture the entire Indian civilization in all its aspects. And to some extent it has been accomplished. Thank you very much.
Now I request Shri Ajit Doval ji to kindly make his address.
Respected Shri Guru Murthy ji, Director of VIF, Dr. Arvind Gupta, Dr. Dilip Chakrabarti, distinguished scholars, my old friends and colleagues in the VIF, members of the media, thank you very much for being here. Today is a very special day. Firstly, my greetings to all of you on Chaitra Navratri and New Year of Vikrami Samvat 2081. It is a very auspicious day. It's a new year for us and very scientific new year. We can talk about it some other day, that why this is the right position of the constellation of the stars and the sun and the moon when this new year starts. Friends, for me, it's a day of a very great satisfaction. It was the initiative that was taken in the VIF, thanks to the idea and inspiration of Shri Guru Murthy ji, who has been always a very dear friend and a colleague, and who had always been shunning the new ideas and thinking that how we can really contribute to something that we will be able to give a new sense of identity and a pride, not only to our countrymen, but also to our coming generations. Our self-image, our identity is deeply connected to your own perception of history and the world's perception of what you are. This idea was conceived. And when we thought of it, I don't think we were very sure how will it proceed, and also not very sure whether we'll be able to complete it. I must give great credit to Dr. Dilip Chakrabarti, an eminent scholar, Professor Emeritus in the University of Cambridge, the Department of Archaeology, with a very long experience and a very credible background of being a very eminent scholar who has contributed a lot and who understood the core and the context and philosophy and the thing of the real historical things in any civilization. And he, along with Professor Makhan Lal, who is unfortunately not here today, who really worked very hard for hours and hours. He was sitting here and contacting the people, writing some of these things, correcting these drafts and others. And I think I must thank most the large body of the scholars from all over the country who had specialized in their respective areas, who gave their time, who contributed to making these research papers, of which are of very high quality, and we can really be proud of it, not only of what they have written, but the great references that they have quoted, and sources from where they have derived their material. So it makes it really a very historical study. There are few questions about Indian history that nobody questions, even our detractors. One is its continuity. Or I'll come to continuity. One is its antiquity. That it is one of the oldest civilizations. And probably the human life had evolved and society had perfected itself to a very high this thing. Now, who did it, whether they were the original people or they came from outside, they may be biased about that. But they all concede that this is a very, very a civilization of antiquity. Second is that it is a continuity. That is, if it started 4,000 or 5,000 years before this thing, BC or this thing, it had been continuous till today. There is no disruption in that. So it was the continuity. And the third feature was it's a vast expanse. It was not a small hamlet that you find somewhere with a developed island or something like that. It is right from the river Oxus to probably Southeast Asia and others, where the footprints of the civilization were very visible. Now the paradox is this, that when you think on this expanse of 6,000 or 8,000 years of the continuous history of in such a vast area, the narrative that has been brought is that probably the first chapter about Indian history in any of the Western thing, it starts with Alexander. That Alexander was the first thing as if he discovered India. And it was the victory of the West over the East. He conquered India. Actually, he only came to the border of India to Jhelum and then probably was not able to proceed further, and thereafter that was the end of him. But the fact remains that the entire history of the Western thing you find when the history of India or the history of the West is narrated, this is about the history of Alexander. Now, Justice William Jones, who was in Calcutta High Court from 1746 to 1792, he had written, and he became a big Sanskrit scholar and he studied Sanskrit here. He said that nowhere in any Sanskrit literature, or Pali literature, or Prakrit literature, or the local dialects, I could find any mention of Alexander. There is no mention. Where there was a copious literature written by not only him, but also the subsequent Greek generals like Menander, who later became Milind, and others, that there was no this thing. It was a non-event. It was a very small event of history where some raiders, the horsebacks came, probably wanted to plunder or come to these things, and thereafter got the resistance, and thereafter they returned back. But you made such a big mountain of it, as if the world history has changed with Alexander the Great Conqueror. And thereafter, then you find, then it comes to the medieval ages, more to the things of the Muslim things, and then the Mughal Empire. If anybody comes to Delhi and wants to visit the historical places or the tourist thing, well, he will find it will be the Taj Mahal or Red Fort or Humayun Tomb or any of these places. As if that is all what the history is all about. Why it happened so? This is something for us to ponder. That why was it? We can have this thing that we didn't write our own history. Yes, that's one of the reasons. Why did it happen? One, of course, is the factor that there was a foreign domination, and this foreign domination of physical domination can be accomplished through your armies, through this thing, but for mental domination, it is necessary that they should have no sense of pride in their own history, in their past. Nations are members of a nationhood are those people who share a common sense of the history, common sense of our ancestors, common sense of their achievements of the past, and a common vision of their future. All those who believe in that, they make one nation. People who have got a different sense of history, if my hero is your villain, you and I cannot make a nation. So for the nationhood, not to develop the feeling of the nationhood, it was that necessary that the foreign domination was responsible to some extent. Then there was a deliberate attempt to destroy the vestiges of the proofs of that. Now, it's not only the temples that religious bigotry, this thing, but institutions like Nalanda or Takshila or the libraries or these things, they were the prime targets, that they have to be destroyed, and that any sources from where Indians could connect themselves to their glorious past, that has got to be connected. But there was another reason for that. That was the Indians' own mindset. And the India's own mindset was that for us, events and personalities were very secondary events. It was the thoughts, the intellect, evolution of these things, the science, technology, the outer space, the inner space, what is the universe and this thing. That is what constituted the focus of the intellectual these things. So we don't find that treatise about the kings or the queens, their marriages and divorces or killings, or this thing, as Mr. Gurumurthy said, it's not only about the conquest and the killings and domination and subjugation, which was the history. They were the people, they were peripheral. Material part, anything that was material, was considered to be much more mundane than something which was more sublime, that was more intellectual and more thoughtful. Now that focus of intellectualism probably, even if when there are some references, and that is why this thing in the literature or in this thing like that, say in Raj Tarangeni, either in Kallan writing something and others, there are passing remarks. The more thing is that he's talking about the nature, he's talking about the rivers, he's talking about the mountains, he's talking about this thing. There are the various types of things that he has mentioned. It's not the chronology of these things or something of the great achievements of the people. Now, this combination of these factors deprived us of our having the right sense of our own existence and identity. And history is important for your identity. History is important for you to understand who you are and what you are. You build your future on the basis of what you think was your past. And this probably was internalized by no one else better than Swami Vivekananda. When he was addressing the youth in Alwar, he said, I want the Indians to write their own history. But he emphasized, not that I wanted to write a wrong history to build up the morale of the Indians. I want the right, correct, authentic, objective history. And that is what Prof. Chakrabarti also mentioned just now. That is when we started the project, we said, let it be totally authentic. We don't want to generate propaganda material. The foundations of such type of intellectualism does not have a long shelf life. If you want it to be this thing, let it be based on complete facts and on the basis of authentic historical or authentic scientific material that we can quote it. And that's why I said that any one of you who will have the opportunity to go through that, you will find that our scholars have done a great work in seeing that anything that they've quoted, any conferences that they have drawn is based on very solid scientific foundations. And not only in India, but now I find that more and more, even the foreign scholars who have written of late, there are many good districts in which they have said that about, say, the fact that the earth is spherical and not a plane, this thing. It took 2,400 years for the West to know and agree to that. They always doubted and they always thought that it was a very wrong thing. Circumference of the earth or the distance of the earth from the sun, all these are now correct to more than 0.1% accuracy. How did they find it? And this is not something which is something anybody is inventing. It is something which already existed but was not probably brought out. Partly these books are brought out, but now some of the books have come out in the West also which have profoundly wrote about it. This is something that we call our history. Our history of science, our history of literature, our history of metallurgy, our knowledge of the evolution of the society, the human beings and their existence, their experiences and their aspirations, and how we look at the life in totality as a whole. In these 11 volumes, which I must congratulate Dr. Arvind Gupta, that he has been able to successfully complete this task. It's always easy to start anything, But I think the real victorious are those who finally score the goal, and the last man who scores the goal, who is the real winner. So I must congratulate him. And of course, Dr. Dilip Chakrabarti had been associated with it right from the beginning till the end, and he deserves all the thing of it. And of course, Gurumurti ji's contribution, both in the conceiving the idea and practicing. And we used to discuss about these matters for hours, for a very, very long time, which we are very fond of spending time with each other on issues like that. And thereafter also, now that he's taking much more and greater time, spending a little more time in the VIF, that these final volumes have come. I congratulate all of you and all the VIF and its entire staff for having done this. But this is not the end. This was a means to an end. And the end objective of really building up a nation on the basis of a sense of common heritage, of common background from which we come, on the having pride in our ancestry and in our achievements of the past, and having a vision for the future. How do we really achieve that? What else is there that can be done? I think that is one thing that probably should continue to exercise the brains of the people here in the VIF, that they are able to take this thing. The second thing which has been a little shortcoming of this project has been that while a lot of material has been this thing, it could not be disseminated as much as we wanted it to. One of the reasons that it's too bulky. Second is that it's very expensive. After building up these 11 volumes have costed us, it cost about 25,000 for this thing like that. Prime Minister Modi, when he was presented at this thing, and when I told him about it, he was so delighted. He wanted to have it. It still finds a very place of prominence in his library, and he's very fond of it. I often pick up a book and go through it. And he had an idea that, well, we should, to the all world libraries, we should donate it. I think that idea is still there. We probably will accomplish it sometime. That where the researches are being done. So maybe in all the Western universities and also in the Eastern universities where various scholars are working on various themes. Now, for example, we are going to make this thing in Lothal, a museum of shipping, and an international this thing of the shipping. Now, there they want also some of the things from the original papers of this thing on these which are available. Similarly, there is a whole plan of making the museums of what used to be the North Block and South Block, and the secretaries moved from here. And in these museums, we have some dedicated things. Now, for example, I tell you how the small things matter. We had some things of the Buddhist time, and these relics of the Buddhist relics, we took them to wherever we take them, whether it is Sri Lanka or to Thailand or to Cambodia and others. They are the great district for India. And India has got a huge number of them. We have preserved them, but we have probably not been able to leverage it. Now, I think last month and a month before that, for the last 2 months, we had been doing it. And in most of the Buddhist countries, we find that there is a great understanding and great need and desire to have this sort of exposure to the Indian this thing. So I do hope that VIF will continue this great work that they have started and that they had been doing. And once again, my heartiest thanks and congratulations to Dr. Dilip Chakrabarti, Dr. Arvind Gupta, Shri Makkallalji, and all the staff of the VIF, and particularly the research scholars who have done a splendid work. Thank you very much, all of you.
I think the three distinguished speakers today have outlined the importance of these volumes and also given us the background. But this is a work that needs to be carried forward. And we have been discussing with Professor Chakrabarti that perhaps these 11 volumes need to be condensed into one volume that people of this Twitter age can at least read some of what they're saying, and maybe this probably should be converted into a few tweets so that people know that there is something like this that exists. But yes, I think one thing which probably these volumes will do, today we are interacting with all kinds of people, particularly people who are coming, various delegations who come to us. And there is this need for building an Indian narrative. Now, these kind of publications, when we read, I think will help all of us to get that confidence to build that Indian narrative in so many fields. And I think this is a very long time, and I think reinforces this point in all his talks, that India is a civilizational state. And I think this is what comes out from these volumes also. But from that, what is the civilizational attributes will emerge our Indian narratives. And these Indian narratives in various fields, which we need to bring into our narrative for this world. You know, the world is changing. We are in a Renaissance period. We are in Amrit Kal. We are going to emerge as a developed country. And as a result of this, there's a lot of, positive and negative backlash, I think we are going to see. And we have to be ready with our arguments and other reasonings and so on. So I think these volumes will be useful from that point of view also. Again, take this opportunity to thank Doval ji, Gurumurthy ji and Chakrabarti ji for being with us today, and all of you who have been listening to this. And I think we need your support in taking this project forward. Thank you very much, and namaskar.